This time I'm the Prop Master. Well, having completed everything that goes onto the jetpack in the last video, we can finally get around to getting this thing ready for paint. What? Oh. One? Never mind. So yeah, it does seem like there's always one last thing that has to be done. In this case, it is, I decided to change the way I wanted to go about dealing with this part here. If you notice, there's these little indentions that go all the way around. And the way I was going to do it was a little problematic. So I decided to change the way I was going to do that. And I'll go into that in the video. You also might notice this little black line here. That's just some evidence that I finally got tired of the bad job that I did previously on this part, and took the time to go ahead and make another one that is, equal and symmetrical, and then put it in place. And it was, as it turned out, just a tiny bit shorter than the one before. So I had to put a little layer of black ABS plastic in there to make it the difference. But I think it looks great. You know the main drill. Please interact with this video. Trying to keep things going. As you can tell, I'm trying to make this a quick video, so I'm trying to race through this. And there's actually a lot of steps that go into making this little piece that goes on. So we better get to work. So what we need to deal with here is there should be some little, not necessarily holes, but little indentions on this underside right here, all the way around. I keep forgetting about this on the build. And I originally thought I would just go with a drill or probably a Dremel tool and just, mark all the way around and then hit it with some kind of a burr on the Dremel tool or the rotary tool all the way around. And I did some testing and I wasn't really happy with any of the results. These are okay, but I had to use a very specialized bit, which is not necessarily an easy one to find, so that seems like a bad idea. So I toyed with a couple other things, and then while I was looking at images of the jetpack, I decided what it really looks like is that they had a piece that just attached to this part. So that's basically what I did. So you make this, and then it glues in place here, and that looks very much like what the actual prop looked like. So let's go ahead and do that for real. I made a template for this, which I'll post on in the comments, not in the comments, but in the info section of this video. And I'm also going to include this in the regular templates. So if you've downloaded the main template bundle after this video comes out, then it'll already be in there. Now I'm going to use some of this 1/8 of an inch Sintra. What is it? It's like 3 millimeters, something like that. And I'm going to go ahead and just spray mount this down to the Sintra itself and then use that to cut it out. Now when you spray mount this is what I would suggest, which is the Scotch spray mount. They make a lot of different spray adhesives, but you specifically want the spray mount. If you use something stronger than that, like, definitely avoid the Super 77 because it'll stay in place for everything, but then you'll have to sand it off afterwards because you cannot peel it off. You have this kind of stuff, which says heavy duty, but if you use this, I can almost guarantee it's going to peel up long before you're finished working on it. You can use this. In fact, that's what I used when I did this piece here. And like I said, it's peeling up while you're trying to saw it out. Once it was actually okay until you cut the whole thing out and it's this thin, and then trying to do anything else with it, it tries to peel up constantly. So I went out and got my standby, or my usual, which is the spray mount by Scotch. So let me go ahead and attach this and I'll be right back. And you just spray this on and then wait a minute, maybe 2 minutes at most, for it to just not be wet, and then we can stick it on. Okay, now I can take this over to the jigsaw and cut it out. By the way, if all you have is the Gorilla spray mount or some type that doesn't stay so, doesn't stick so well, then I would say just cut this whole thing on the outside and then across so that it's sort of a big, semicircle. And then drill your holes and then go back and cut this part out and you'll probably be okay. Okay, there's that. Okay, I've got a scratch awl here. That's what I'm going to use to go around here as a punch. If all you have is a punch, that's fine. I like the scratch awl just because it's such a finer point. It makes it a lot easier for me to see where I'm putting the point. And I just want to line this up with the center. This is basically a tiny little circle with a little crosshairs, but a little black dot right in the middle. You want to go for that little black dot in the middle. And I'm just going to go all the way around. It's really hard for me to get this accurately while it's on camera, so I'm going to go, off camera so that I can stick my head right up against this. And I'll punch all of these and I'll be right back. Okay, now I have all of these punched. Also, don't forget to take the protective cover off of your Sintra here. I'm taking it off now because I found with the other piece, if you wait until after you drill these holes, it gets really hard to peel this off. It just tears in between all of the holes. Yeah, that was much easier. Now let's go over to the drill press. You can use just a regular hand drill for this if you want to, but let's go to the drill press and do it there. Okay, over the drill press. This is probably a pretty good time to take off your paper, especially if you use something other than spray mount. Like if you use the Gorilla brand, then now it's a pretty good time to take it off. If you use the Super 77, that's not coming off. I got kind of a weird spot right here, but it's going to be fine once it's actually on the piece. What you're going to want to do, well, I say this, what you can do if you want to is just use a 15/64 bit to drill holes, completely through this. That's about a 5 3/4 of a millimeter. If I don't know what sizes metric drill bits come in. So if you're in 1/4 of a millimeter, then you can do that. Otherwise, I would just go with a 6 millimeter. I'm doing something different. I've got my countersink bit here, which I don't know if you can actually see there, but it's just a, sort of a very wide bit that comes down to a point. And I've got my maximum depth set so that it's only going to drill into this to the point where it gives me a 15/64 dimple at the top. It'll make a smaller hole, all the way through it, but that's okay. And I just want to go through all, 16 or 18 of these? I can't remember. And we'll go from there. Basically, to set that, what I did was I drew 2 lines that were 15/64 of an inch, and then I drilled into this until it touched both of those lines, and then holding it in position, I went overhead and I set my depth gauge right here so that it would only go down to that depth. I can't tell you what that measurement is because it's definitely dependent on what size board you're putting underneath it, as well as the thickness of the Sintra. You can use thinner Sintra than this, but I would not use thicker. I always do that. I set the camera up and then it's right where my hand goes. Hold on a second. This might work better, or it might just be some other part of my body getting in the way. We'll see. And I'm just using the punch marks to line everything up. It's a lot faster than trying to eyeball each drill spot. have to be careful because if you get too much debris underneath here, it will raise up the height of this and make the holes bigger. Okay, now we have that, and we can go ahead and see about putting it in place. Now you can do this using the actual jetpack itself, but it's going to be a lot easier. I have an extra one of these that I used when I was trying to test out to drill into. This is the same part that's on the jetpack. It's just bigger here because it wasn't cut. And I'm going to use this to form this into the right shape. It's just going to be a lot easier doing it that way than trying to do it on the jetpack. And I should have mentioned this earlier. I really like using the Sintra, even if it's this thick. I think it works quite well. I have a thinner sheet of ABS plastic, and I found that the ABS has a tendency to shrink when I heat it up. So once again, this is the, I want to say 1/8, it might be 1/16. Yeah, it's 1/8. Okay, now I've got my heat gun, and I'm just going to, I'm going to get this hot. You don't want to get it too hot because you can distort it. And you don't have to use gloves for this. I didn't when I did the test piece, but it does get quite hot, and it's always a good idea. And unfortunately, there's a chance that you may have to do this more than once because it's easy to mess this part up. But it's also not that hard. I mean, at this point you will have had maybe 15 minutes into the process. Let's see if this is moldable. Yep. And you just want to line the top up with where the angle meets this more straight up area here. That went quite well, actually. So there's a bit of a gap there, but there's always going to be somewhat of a gap because the template works great if it's a flat sheet of paper, but this has some dimension to it, 1/8 of an inch thick, so it's going to be a little off. So we're always going to have to fill a little bit of a gap. So that looks fantastic. Now we just have to glue it in place. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to mark right up in this middle part in front of this little hole. There's a little hole on this piece that lines up with the slots down here. Now they're not going to line up perfectly because these on mine, these are all messed up, and the ones that we just made are perfectly spaced, so it's not going to be perfect, but it'll work, especially in the front. So when I put this on there, I want to make sure that one of these little dimples here lines up with that little line. And I'm kind of going back and forth on how to glue this on here. I think I'm going to go with the gel super glue. I used hot glue on the test piece just because I knew I could pry it off afterwards, and it did pry off quite well, but it also stuck pretty well. The reason why I'm hesitant to use super glue is it's going to be a matter of getting this on there and in the right place before the super glue sets, and on PVC it sets quite quickly. On the other hand, as I learned in the con that I just went to, hot glue is a temporary solution for most things. I think for this it's going to be okay. I think we can go ahead and glue it on here because this doesn't, it's not load bearing in any way except for its own weight, which is, in grams. But at the con I had my left van brace fall off right after my first photograph with somebody and shatter into half a dozen pieces. I was able to repair everything. What happened was the hot glue that was holding, obviously, the hinges failed and completely came off, and this thing went crashing down to the concrete. So I have, luckily somebody there had some super glue and I was able to repair it temporarily. And then when I got home, I sort of rebuilt the thing, reinforcing all the places where it cracked. And then I've gone back and put screws in. I found some very short screws and put them in all of the areas where the hinges are, so that there's no way it's gonna, no glue's gonna be holding this thing on my arm. So if it's just putting something on, it's probably pretty safe. But for a critical thing like a hinge or an attachment for something that's heavy, like this van brace is, I would definitely not use hot glue. I glued everything back together with super glue, and that held for the rest of the day without any trouble at all. So I'd say that probably super glue is a little safer in the long run. And that's why I think I'm going to use super glue, but it's going to give me a lot less time to get my adjustments, positioning and everything just right. So I'm just going to take this gel super glue and I'm going to put a little blob in between all of the holes, because I don't want it, squishing up through into here. But I want it to be sort of consistent, so I'm going to put just a little dab in between the holes all the way around. This is brand new glue, and I need to shake it up, and you do that to make sure the glue is down where it will actually come out. I want to get a little bit on the edges here as well. I think those are touching in the back. And it's intentional that there's a gap at the top, that this doesn't go all the way to the top, because that's what the actual prop does. And I wanted to get the seam back here because it'll be, no one's ever going to see that. Your head will be here, and there'll be very little space for there. Plus, we'll fill in a gap. I think that's good enough. I'm getting a little bit of a gap at the top in a couple of spots. Maybe I'll get some regular super glue and tack those in place. I've gotten just some regular liquid super glue. I'm not going to use the thin stuff because I'm afraid that would go all the way through it and then, out the little holes at the bottom and run down the sides and make little drip marks. But this is thin enough that it should get down into the gaps. Let me see if I can move this to a spot where you can see what I'm doing. So you can see right there, this kind of can push up. I'm going to try just to get some. Here's the part where I glue my fingers to this. So while holding that in place, I'm going to hit with some zip kicker. Trying to wipe off any zip kicker that's gotten in there, because I want it to kind of flow into the gap before it hardens. Let's see if I can change the angle just a little bit. Okay, that seems solid all the way around. Okay, now we just want to take care of this sharp corner that's across here, and we'll be good. Okay, so coarse sanding stick, and I just want to knock this sort of sharp edge down all the way around. Also, if you get any kind of a concave kind of a shape because of heating it up, you want to try to flatten that out as well, mostly on this top surface. So right now I'm just flattening out any curve that's there. I'm going to go all the way around and take care of this edge and make sure everything's nice and flat, and I'll be back. Okay, to deal with this gap, I think I'm going to go with, we could go with caulking, even modeling putty, but I think I'm going to go with the baking soda and a CA glue, thin CA glue that is. But before that, I'm going to see if I can't. It's pretty smooth, but there's a couple of spots where I can make these meet a little bit better. I can tell this is going to be difficult to make sure I don't have any baking soda in the holes. I guess the smart thing to do would be to take some tape and cover those up, but that would get in the way of me just doing this, so. And I've got my thin CA glue. Okay. And right before I paint this, if I decide that there's still a little thing I don't like, I can hit that with a little bit of caulking. See if I've got a little file that can get in there a little better. That was just a 1, 2, 3 block falling. See, I can see that seam, but I can't feel it. Maybe a tiny bit on the very edges. A little bit right there. I don't think that's the seam so much as the fact that it's this side over here is a little bit higher than that side. Okay, I think that's going to take care of it. Now that really is the last thing that we're going to put on here. Everything else is just going to be touching up some stuff that's already on. I think for me this actually counts as a short. As always, if you liked this video or thought it was helpful, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss any other videos. And most importantly, if you're still watching this at this point, please leave a comment, even if it's just to say hi. It'll help so much for the channel. The more these videos get interacted with, the more it gets shared with other people, and the more my subscribers can grow. Not to mention that it's really the comments that keep me going, so if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them down below and I will answer them as soon as possible. But with that in mind, I'll see you next time. Thanks.